Graceland, Fred's right that it allows the U.S. to say, we're getting something out of this. It's a win for the administration. It's kind of a win for the Ukrainians. And here's where your mining expertise can maybe come in handy. There's a lot of dispute about just whether there are rare earths in Ukraine in the first place. How many other critical minerals might exist but can actually be mined because they might be in Russian territory or the mines have never been developed and that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to do so. How realistic is it that any minerals are coming out of Ukraine in the near term?
Thanks so much for having me. So there's a couple really big points we need to hit here. The first thing is that the negotiated deal does not include revenue from current operating minerals, oil, or gas assets. It's future assets, which essentially means that, from the time I start developing a project, on average globally, it takes 18 years from the time I start from project identification to the time I have a fully producing mine. So this is a really long-term look ahead. There's no rare earth mines that are operating right now. And in fact, the former director general of the Ukrainian Geological Survey has said we don't even have a modern mapping of rare earths. The last mapping was done by the Soviet Union. It's quite old. At that time, some of those minerals weren't nearly as strategic as they are now. But remember, unlike countries like Russia, China, or Saudi Arabia, we don't have a state-owned mining company. This is a government-to-government agreement, but ultimately the private sector has to come in and make significant investments. We talk about an 18-year timeline. A mine in the associated processing plant costs $500 million to $1 billion. That's a significant amount of capital that has to come in to a high-risk jurisdiction. So this isn't something that's going to send us rare earths 6 months from now because there's no producing rare earths right now.
I think you summed it up beautifully. And so if I were Ukraine, I would want to emphasize this aspect, Grace. Like, you can have all the rare earths. We'll give them to you, because it's a tactical win without necessarily being anything in substance.
I totally agree with you. I mean, before we even get to a point where we can mine, we're going to have to do a mapping. There's going to have to be a lot of rebuilding of energy infrastructure. Mining uses about 16% of the world's global electricity, and Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been severely damaged in the course of the war. So there's going to be the rebuilding of energy and roads for the mining sector, and then eventually we will get to producing assets. So really, there's a whole ecosystem that can be developed around this deal, and it's not going to be just a loss of minerals tomorrow.
Is there anything that could hasten this, that could, if we say, okay, well, you know what, we're willing to, I don't know, we're going to send our best U.S. assets and scientists and companies, and we're going to go in. I mean, if we did something to that extent, Graceland, like sending people to the moon, do you think we could come back with significant rare earths or other minerals? My understanding is the other minerals that Ukraine has in decent supply are ones that we also have in decent supply here.
Yes and no. They have bigger reserves of things like graphite, for example, right? We do have less than 1%. They do have graphite, uranium. Titanium is really vital for defense technology, and they have significant reserves. But all of these assets will take a lot of time. And what we haven't seen in this dialogue is a lot of private sector capital saying, once this agreement is there, I will go. And so, considering that is ultimately the dialogue will have to move to how do we take this from a paper-based agreement to something that's action-oriented.